This two-person basement dwelling company feasted on $64 million taxpayer dollars. This was a direct gift from the Liberal government who allowed basic procurement rules to be completely ignored over the last 10 years.
GC strategy has been prohibited from government contracts for 7 years. As a member of Canada's new government and a new member of Parliament, we will uphold higher standards, Mr. Speaker.
How about spend less on your insider friends and invest more in clawing back the money from GC Strategies?
As of last year, GC Strategies has seen its contracts terminated by the Government of Canada, and we've revoked their security clearance.
Prime Minister Mark Carney and his new Minister of Procurement, Joel Lightbound, there defending nearly a decade of procurement mismanagement. That's according to the Auditor General, who investigated 106 contracts awarded to the firm GC Strategies from 2015 until 2024. She found that the government failed in many cases to follow its own procurement rules. For a brief refresher, that's the company behind the beleaguered COVID-era border control app, ArriveCan. That was a project originally billed at $80,000. It wound up costing $60 million taxpayer dollars. Are the feds now doing enough to ensure value for your money? Let's talk about that with the front bench. With me tonight, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is here. He's a senior advisor with Edelman. CTV News political analyst and former leader of the federal NDP, Tom Mulcair, is with us, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief, Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. Great to see you. The funniest clip today, I think, Tom, was from the leader of the Conservatives outside the House, Pierre Poilievre, when he said, described the Auditor General's reports today as an orgy of Liberal waste. How much cover does the Mark Carney government have in describing itself as a new government and sort of ensuring that this doesn't continue?
There was a choice of words there that I found interesting by Carney, and he hasn't done it often, but there have been moments when he's had to distance himself clearly from what was chronic mismanagement, especially on the economic side by the Trudeau government. And he simply said, this is a new government. We're not going to work that way. We're going to be responsible and we'll follow the rules. There's not much else he can say. But several times now he's thrown the previous administration under the bus. I guess it would help his case a little bit if there weren't so many people from that previous administration sitting around his cabinet table. But I think that overall Canadians are buying it. I think that Carney is being given that as part of his honeymoon package. We'll see whether it lasts into the fall.
Yeah, it certainly is, James, I think, a message that we've heard on occasion from the Prime Minister in trying to delineate himself from the previous government. One of the big areas is around government spending. And he's invoked, talk of responsibility and sort of being more restrained on a number of occasions throughout the campaign. And even since, why do you think that is, and will it work?
Like this, that are very easy to understand, right? Sorry. Oh, can you hear me all right?
Sorry, start again if you don't mind. You're on mute.
Sure. I was going to say, it's boutique examples like this that the public genuinely understands, right? More than 100 contracts spanning close to a decade for, frankly, a piece of software that ChatGPT probably could have spat out inside of about 20 minutes. And so, Canadians really understand this. And to Tom's point, for a lot of Canadians, policy is personnel. And so the ability of this Prime Minister to say, this is a new government, I'm a new Prime Minister, and we are changing the ways from the past, it's a good line, it's a holding line. It has purchase right now, but in the fullness of time, if you still have the same personalities and cabinet ministers standing up and saying, we've learned from the past, well, it's hard to divorce the past from the people who were there in the past, who are the authors of the policy that got us into this mess. So it's going to be a challenge. And then when you get to larger ticket items like the F-35 or an increase in defense spending or trusting the same hands with large-scale procurement with really sensitive environmental, indigenous, and nation-building components that we're planning on doing in the next little while, there's an element of trust here that I think Prime Minister Carney as a person has, but he should not risk losing that political capital and trust with the public by surrounding himself with people who are defending the indefensible policies and approaches of the past.
The F-35 report done by the AG is also really interesting, Rob, insofar as she really clearly lays out that it's not just the costs which have ballooned, but maybe even more significantly, we are not set up at this point, nor do we even have a plan at this point to make sure that pilots are trained to operate them should they start arriving in 2028. And she described it as all of the stuff National Defense is doing around this is very reactive and not proactive, which is ironic almost against the backdrop of yesterday's big announcement, which was we're going to spend a whole lot more and do a whole lot more.
Exactly, Vashi. I mean, it's great we're buying new fighter jets, even though the price, we were told a price that was already wrong when we were told it, as she explained in her report today. It's inflated by, what, 50% more than we thought it was going to be, and we don't have enough pilots trained to fly these Lightning IIs, the new fighters. So and Tom knows this. He was a very effective leader of the opposition. Auditor General Day is the best day to be an opposition leader. It's the worst day in government because it's boondoggle after boondoggle. And I think that Carney can legitimately say he's new, he wasn't there at the time, but that is going to wear thin pretty quickly. I thought he had almost like a Cheshire cat grin today when he was taking questions on the report, basically saying how things have changed now that I'm here. Having said all that, if this were sticky, Justin Trudeau wouldn't be getting reelected, and Justin Trudeau is ancient history, so this isn't going to be sticky. It's unfortunately for the Conservatives, who would have been the main beneficiaries of a report like this traditionally. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's sticky.
I think the grin that Rob is referencing, Brian, is exactly the clip we played where the Prime Minister, again, and he does this on occasion in question period, talk about the new government, right? So you have opposition who are, pointing out things like today's Auditor General's report, which is significantly damning of the actions of people around the cabinet table and the former Prime Minister and the former government. And the reply is most frequently, hey, it's the new government. So my question is sort of similar as it was to your colleagues, like how long does that actually land?
Yeah, I prescribe to what Benzie said. I think that it does work. I think that Canadians see a new leader, a new prime minister, and they put a lot of attention, not just in the last little while, but I think they've done this for a long time. They put a lot of attention, a lot of sort of chips on who the leader and the prime minister is, or the premier at the provincial level. So my sense would be that it probably will be a good holding line, as James called it. It will be one in which people will say, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I think the real test, as Benzie pointed out, it'll be over time. And if he kind of cleans up this type of thing, and there's not many of them, or hopefully for Canadians' sake, none at all, then I think people will say, yeah, it wasn't just a holding line. It is a new government. They changed. They delivered. If they don't, and if there are similar things, then I think it becomes pretty complicated. So although I think the Conservatives don't get the bang out of their buck that they would want today, they are potentially setting up that if there are issues like this that continue to happen, that they're going to be able to sort of start to point to a trail of things that have happened under his watch and then connect it to the previous government and say, look, it's all sort of the same. So point that I'm getting at, I think the sort of grin is most likely. I didn't watch question period, but my guess is that it's most likely because he knows that sort of irritates the Conservatives when he uses that line. But using that is a fair point that Canadians will accept, I think, as long as he really does indeed kind of clean things up and we don't see these types of issues moving forward under his government.
Do you think, more generally speaking, in particular, like I think to be fair to the government, they have made announcements like the defense one yesterday that, does contrast them to the previous government. Do you think, Tom, though, that like that fall budget will ultimately be the proof point that sort of does away with a lot of the benefit of the doubt that they've been awarded?
Absolutely. I think the fall session is going to be the time for the new government to start assuming its role fully and stop trying to roll back on what happened before, just saying, oh, that wasn't us, that was some other gang who happened to be around the cabinet table. With regard to the government spending on defense, which was announced yesterday to get us to the 2% that is we agreed to as the minimum expenditure of 2% of GDP to be part of NATO, well, the Auditor General's report really helps in that direction because the money that we're going to be spending on these fighters is a lot more. The other thing that's on the table, everybody's correctly interpreted this as being an attempt by Canada to make sure we can answer some of the critiques of Trump, and Trump can crow some sort of victory saying, oh, Canada's going to be paying more on defense. But at the same time, as Carney is starting to show more and more impatience with Trump and perhaps getting ready for his own round of counter tariffs, it's worth bearing in mind that the total cost, if you look at all that has to be spent, the billions and the billions to redo Cold Lake and Bagotville, the two bases where they'll be located. When you look at the massive contract for maintenance over the years, you're looking at about $100 billion. And so that's a lot of money for the American company that's in the running right now for this, for the F-35. And I think that we've got to be ready to start saying, you know what, there are things called Rafales and there are SABs and there are Eurofighters. They all have two engines, miraculously, and the Lightning II only has one engine. Good luck with that over the Arctic. So I think that Canada has an argument that could be made against this boondoggle. If it's the only thing that's left in the room, we can say, no, there are other options.
I feel like the problem, at least from a political perspective with that is, James, that we've already spent a sum of that money and a significant amount of it, not nearly $100 billion. But the second part is, a few weeks ago, we had the U.S. ambassador on this program who basically said, if we don't buy those, say goodbye to NORAD.
Yeah, I mean, it's a step too far, but whatever. That's the nature of politics these days. But look, there is a sunken cost here. It would be a bit of a jiu-jitsu move for the government to say, hey, we were spending $19 billion, now we're up to $27 billion. So, there you go, closer to 2%. We're on our way. I don't think they'll quite be. I don't think they'll be quite that cute. But you can see that interoperability and alignment technologically wise with the United States and with our NORAD and NATO partners is obviously a benefit of the F-35 program, broadly speaking. The economic benefits for the aerospace sector in Canada, there is a benefit to be said there. The single engine in the Arctic is a concern that has been raised by many, including the late Mark Carney when he was critic of this project for a long time. But the Liberals really do own this, right? I mean, they got elected in 2015. Tom will remember being very definitive and saying the F-35 will never happen. Then they got elected and they went into the F-35 and they said, but it will be on budget and on time. It's not on budget. It's not on time. Then now you have this imperative to align our interests on not only the 2%, but the interoperability of technology with the United States as part of the pathway to get towards rapprochement with the Trump administration on the trade files, the security files, the border files, and all that. So this is now a spoke in a bigger wheel of Canada-U.S. relations that goes beyond the uniqueness of this technology and what it means for Canada's defense capacity. So I think there's just so much momentum behind this that it's not something we're going to turn around. Having more diversity in our air capacity, though, is something that the government of Canada will have to think about in the out years, though.